Hello, everyone. I'm Jyoti Sengar, a product manager with PayPal, and I own the home screen experience for PayPal's consumer app and web experience. I'm excited today to talk about two of my favorite topics, payments and product management. I have a slide deck right in front of me, so I just wanted to start sharing right away. Uh, I hope everybody is excited to talk about it. I am personally, because payments is one of my favorite topic. Um, I'm mostly talking to a lot of people about it. So here we go. Through the next half an hour, we will discuss how to build a payment platform. And before we do that, let's define the platform a bit. A payment platform is essentially a solution that facilitates money movement, or simply put, accept and process payments whenever commerce happens. To be fair with you, this topic is quite broad, and 30 minutes might not be sufficient. So I'll keep the focus towards solving for needs of small and medium businesses. And also, to make this discussion more fruitful for the aspiring product managers, I would tackle this as a case for interview question for market entry case study. And if you guys feel the need to ask any questions, feel free to comment below. I'll be happy to answer them towards the end. Let's dive right in. Most of you would have seen these three rings depicting why, how, and what. I first saw this as part of a TED Talk by Simon Sinek, and I wanted to use it professionally. So I read the book written by him called Start With Why. And I felt that the concepts presented here were a great starting point for breaking down a problem or understanding a new business case. As a product manager, it's always great if you have a framework in mind to structure your thought. Again, there's no right or wrong framework, but it really makes it easy for the listener to follow along. So I'll take a flavor of this in our discussion today to include on what and why to build. But I'm planning to replace the how part, because that's more execution and tactical, to replace it with whom to build for, so that we can focus on the segment and spend some more time on identifying the personas. So here's how I'm planning to break the discussion into three parts. Firstly, we would define the problem space. Secondly, we'll identify the user segments and their needs. And lastly, we would talk about challenges or threats one might face in the payment value chain. So in an ideal world, we could imagine scenarios without budget or any restrictions. But as a product manager, it would be super advisable if you keep in mind the constraints and market-specific issues. I myself have worked in developing economies of India and Africa, where internet penetration was sometimes not there. So for today's scope, I'm going to choose the constraint of internet connectivity. So essentially, we'll be talking about online and offline payment scenarios. And hopefully, by the end of our session, we'll have an understanding of the payment value chain for a small-scale business and an initial understanding of what key factors or challenges to keep in mind while building a payment platform. But before we start, here's a quick intro about my professional journey from a software developer to a product manager and how I transitioned into the payment space. I'm currently working with PayPal and I've completed 3 years here in the Bay Area, working on projects to build consumer platform. I've mostly been on the consumer experience side in PayPal, but have built experiences in cross-border remittances, in-store payment, and many more. So I'll talk to them and bring the flavor of what I've learned over the work experience in the payment industry. And prior to US, I was working in India, my home country, where I started as a software engineer with Adobe Systems, working on Acrobat, commonly known for PDF Reader. After 3 years of technical role, I realized I wanted to branch out a little career-wise. So I enrolled myself in a B school, did my MBA in strategy and finance, and got the opportunity to work in a telecom company called Bharti Airtel. Airtel was second largest telecom provider in India at that time. It had about 220 million subscribers. I mostly worked on consulting or finance projects to improve the top line sales and reduce operational cost. But the job really allowed me to study the behavioral aspects of how people use internet. You can imagine Airtel to be AT&T or Verizon of India, but the company had diversified in payment space as well. This was my first encounter with mobile payments, and thereafter I decided to join a small startup called Paytm to kickstart my finance journey. I called Paytm a startup because it was 5 years back, but now the company has really become a $1 billion unicorn. It really found its product market fit, I would say. For those of you who are not familiar with Paytm, it is a digital payments platform that enabled users to make payments for everyday use cases. The firm had a vision to see India's transition into a completely digital economy where all transactions could be made digital and transactions can be cashless. Again, it's a good vision to have. And my job of product manager, I was building solutions for expanding this payment network for unorganized retail sector. I'm trying to bring along a little flavor of the segment that I was working for. And to give an idea of scale, retailing is one of the strong pillars for Indian economy. It accounts for about 15% of its GDP. And what I mean by unorganized retail is the traditional formats of low-cost retailing, which accounts for about 90% of India's retail. So these are mom and pop stores and semi-urban owner-manned shops. So this particular segment had a lot of business opportunity as semi-urban regions had about 50% of the population above the age of 15 that was underserved or unbanked. But it came with its own challenges as well, because these folks were having inertia in accepting a new payment player. They had concerns about security or privacy. And also, the regions had very low penetration of credit and debit card as well. But the story changed a lot when in 2016, India's government took more than 86% of its currency out of circulation. This made India leapfrog into mobile wallet payments, almost skipping the plastic money phase. Maybe that's a discussion for some other time. But this stint gave me a first glance into launching payment solution in a regulated market of India. I made the switch to PayPal after that to work on a global platform. And this payment platform is building solution to work at scale, which are live in more than 200 plus countries. So that's about me. I'll bring the flavor of all the work that I've done previously to bring into attention in this discussion. Also, I shared this to highlight that while we are building a payment platform, you should double click on the infrastructure and regulatory landscape of a target market. If this was posed as a question in an interview, I would really encourage you to step back and ask, why do we really need to build a payment platform and understand the landscape? In our case, let's see, I'm a product manager who's passionate in payment space, but you might be working with a larger firm that has a vision or mission statement towards building financial services. As a product manager, I would always suggest everybody to remember that you are a force multiplier of your company's vision and the business outcomes. So you would be working towards either democratizing financial services to empower people and businesses to join and thrive in global economy, or even having a vision to improve their financial health. So you find these as common themes across all payment enablers. And some of you might be thinking of a specific segment. So I added this mission statement from Squares. I personally like this because it totally takes care of less technical and small, medium businesses as well. No one should be left out of the economy because the cost is too great or the technology is too complex. So, okay, great. Now that we have accomplished the mission, we'll take the next step of defining strategy level objectives out of this vision. So we want to build a payment provider of choice for consumers who are looking to make a payment during online checkouts. And why not? E-commerce is growing well. Or maybe I want to double down on the online space, as quite a lot of retailers are still selling face-to-face, and some restaurants, food trucks still prefer cash. So essentially, I'm building a truly omni-channel payment platform with an uber goal that this should enable businesses of all sorts to continue growing. And again, please note that this goal is not mutually exclusive from building a platform, as we are essentially taking care of the overall payment ecosystem. So keeping in mind both the demand and supply side. But for the scope of our discussion today, I would restrict the scope of the discussion to the supply side, the businesses. Now we'll move on to my favorite part of this presentation, which is defining whom to build for. So I'll be segmenting to identify personas and their needs. And while we go in there, again, a quick disclaimer here. This is just a rough draft to give a high-level idea of which dimensions to choose from, because there could be multiple dimensions around how to break down a business and segment them. I'll give 3 dimensions to just give an example here. It could be done in terms of scale of business, that is the total payment volume a business receives. Secondly, we can do it using the size of customer base. Or maybe the third way could be if a business is a primary or secondary source of income for the business owner. In our particular case, for the sake of simplicity, I chose a 4th dimension, which is the time spent by a business owner in selling product for his or her venture. So we're talking about full-time or part-time invested by the business owner in their business. I came up with 4 personas here. One is small business owners, second emerging entrepreneur, somebody like a garage seller, and an hobbyist. So it's quite self-explanatory by the names, but I'll read about the garage seller. Say you want to get rid of your seasonal unused items at home, and you want the best price for your stuff. So you might be selling only 4 or 5 times of the year. Similarly, a hobbyist could be someone who's pursuing their hobby and selling handicraft to maybe grow big. But the income has become so meaningful over the time that they're planning to grow big. Product managers usually tend to follow MISI principle. MISI is a systematic problem-solving framework to break down a complex problem. And MISI stands for mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. But in this case, I was a little generous on myself, so these segments might be overlapping a bit. Again, segmentation helps in opportunity sizing the space before we identify the problem areas or the needs of a business. While we do that, it helps in doing a need gap analysis. Let's look at these personas, and I've put down some needs of these users. Maybe this could be done with user interviews or discussions within the team. So a small business owner might need quick access to funds because they're putting in the income back into their business. A lot of customers that they're getting are the ones who are returning customers. So they want to manage their returning customer experience as well, and not just the first-time buyers. So again, this is quite basic, and we would need more data and facts to validate and paint a better picture. But at this stage, we can list down some broad problem areas that the platform should potentially solve for. So I've collated a few, and let's look at them. So they could be something that a business wants to increase their customer reach. Some of them do not want to pay high fees or feel that a setup cost for point of sale terminals is high as compared to the revenues that they're driving. So objective looking at the overall scenario, I can say or make an assumption that very small businesses that have modest income streams are looking for avenues to scale with limited investments. On the other hand, the businesses which are growing faster are looking for more advanced features towards budgeting solution, raising working capital, or they want somebody to propose them an investment opportunity, or something like tax documentation in the end of the year. And they would want it to be in automated fashion because they want to save their own time. So basically, this gives you a flavor of problem space in the payment world. Okay, while we're looking at this overall segmentation problem area, I want to take a dig at it again in a different way. In a real world, there are always constraints. An experienced product manager, would want to segment not just for happy scenarios, but situations where the ideal conditions don't exist. So let's introduce some constraint here. I have worked in India and Africa wherein there was intermittent electricity supply and the fixed line telephony was missing. So maybe I can take an assumption that a third of businesses were still offline there. So I'm taking the constraint of internet connectivity here and how I would want to break down the overall ecosystem of buyers and sellers is to look at them with the lens of the infrastructure availability of internet. So how I would want to do this is by breaking down the space in a 2 by 2 matrix with sellers on x-axis and the buyers on y. We're creating 4 quadrants here with the variance of offline and online scenarios. Again, I've just liberally jotted down some solutions which are available in payment industry today to enable a transaction. These are just by doing a market study, and we would have to do a feasibility analysis of what we want to build, what are the solutions we want to present to the customers that we have. And when I say customers, it could be either sides of buyer or seller. So let's take an example of the first quadrant here, which is where full internet connectivity can be leveraged because both buyers and sellers have internet. We can have payment solutions ranging from online checkout, near field communication, tap and pay using your phone. A few of the examples that I've shown also include payments with your watch, a smartwatch maybe. Well, let's look at the quadrant 4 here, which is the most challenging one, where everything seems to be offline. And there might be intermittent connectivity, but we need to solve for the offline scenario as well. This poses a high operating cost threat. While we're looking at a great opportunity, it might be very heavy on the operating costs for our side. So hopefully this gives you an idea of identifying opportunities that you can weigh in while creating a business for your payment platform. Okay, let's shift gears a bit here. I would want to double click on the challenges in payment value chain. Basically, anything that can act as a deterrent or bottleneck in growing business. Folks, if you have questions around the payment value chain or anything else, you can leave comments there. I would be happy to answer them. But if you're wondering what is a payment value chain, let's take a moment to discuss this. So if you're a small business and planning to choose among all the payments platforms, you need to be aware of who are the players and actors in this situation. For our scope of discussion in the value chain, an acquirer, who could be a bank or a provider of the seller, would facilitate businesses to open a merchant account and also handle their support queries, manage payment processing, and build added value technology on behalf of the issuer. An issuer is a bank of the buyer or the consumer. So the end consumer can make payments for the goods and services they received. So here again, in a 2 by 2 matrix, I like to handle most of my cases in this way. The unique selling point would be the value added services that the platform is bringing in. That could be anything from handling of risk scenarios, preventing fraud, anti-money laundering. Also, while onboarding users and you want to store some information or behavioral traits of them, and which can involve identity verification, etc. So it's a multi-sided platform in a way, and we can analyze each player's role in it. So we can do it in different ways. A traditional method would be to look at the SWOT analysis. But here I have done my rough attempt to highlight all the stakeholders that are significant in this value chain. I've taken them to be the sellers, who are the small and medium businesses, the buyers, who are the end consumers, acquirer. Again, acquirer could be anything who's a provider or a service provider for the seller. And issuers. And issuers could be bank of the buyer or the merchant. Oh, the consumer side, sorry. To mitigate these challenges which are listed here, we would need to come up with a strategy. Let's look at some of the challenges which a buyer might have. A buyer might have inertia towards a new digital payment service, mostly because of security concern or even privacy. They already have a lot of other players and they have credit cards. Why do they need another platform to integrate themselves with? They would have to create a user ID and remember the passwords and a bunch of other things. This usually happens when there's lower awareness of new payment platforms in the industry. Let's talk about a small or medium business. They have high cost of transaction and processing fee. It's an overhead and burden for them to even manage with the marketing cost for generating consumer awareness. For an acquirer issuer, the challenges seem to be a little bit similar. They have high maintenance cost, issuance cost. They have low margins while they're processing payments. So in order to mitigate these challenges while we are building a platform, we need to build a solution that requires lower investment from businesses so that they can have ease of acceptability with the consumers. We should build our platform in a scalable manner that it requires low maintenance support during the post-integration phase. Also, we need to think of a solution that provides better economic opportunity for the small and medium businesses so that they can grow. An example could be to be able to help them in lending and credit, because small and medium businesses might not have a strong credit score which can give them a loan. So overall, these solutions are highly dependent on the market and regional forces of the domain. One of my biggest learning while working in fintech space has been to realize that it is a highly regulated domain with major focus on compliance, risk, and security. So the overall thorough study of challenges and collation of concerns with the various stakeholders, you could have a flavor and thought about compliance as well. And then you need to plan a mitigation plan for the longer run to sustain in the business. I would like to stop here for the discussion, and we've reached to the end of our discussion today. And I'll just summarize for us what we have discussed till now. We've solved for why and the who problem. We touched upon the ways to define the problem statement and identify the target personas. The next steps would be to be more execution focused and handle the discussion more tactically around how to build. And maybe that could be our discussion for the next time. For today, I would like to leave you with some thoughts for your product professional journey or anywhere else as well. I would always challenge you to remember and ask these three questions to yourself. What are the major opportunities around you? Are you able to isolate opinions from facts? What I mean to say is, are you doing user research and quantitatively analyzing the market to validate the hypothesis that you have? And most importantly, are you launching? That means, have you evaluated the cost of inaction, if at all, for not driving the actionables that you found out from your research? Of course, these things are important, how you go about in your discussions. And that's it for today. Hope you found the discussion engaging and learned something new. Feel free to reach out in case you have something interesting in the space of finance to discuss with me. I would stop sharing my presentation here and happy to take any questions if you have. Thank you.